The thing that set me apart when I started Waves for Water was because I was a pro athlete. I came at it from a competitive, professional athlete mindset. And I wanted to win the cause. I was partying hard, I was working my ass off. You know, I was basically in fight or flight for 10 years.
Help me understand what price is paid.
I mean, now we're getting into the real shit. I genuinely took a loan out on myself, and it's gonna impact the longevity of my life.
If you were to be advising a younger version of yourself, how would you encourage them to think about the word success?
I don't know how you're gonna do this, but put a bomb under that word and blow it the fuck up.
Okay, Jon, here we are.
Yeah.
Your beautiful home in Lake Tahoe. You're back in the rugged mountain environment that defined your early years, and it's a long way from the California surf breaks that defined your teens and early 20s. And I want to take you back to those early years, back to your early childhood in Colorado, and a period of time, and particularly an event that it seems to me irrevocably changed the path of your life. And that's when your mother left you and your father and decided to pursue her own spiritual journey. And you and your father shortly thereafter went on a trip to Mexico together. What do you remember about that time, and how do you think about it now?
No, we're diving straight into it. Yeah, so it was a very idyllic childhood. You know, as you said, the very first few years were in Colorado, and then we ended up in Northern California in a small little town called Mount Shasta, and it was just me and my mom and my dad. And I look back on that time period, and I have these very vivid memories, and it was very idyllic. And we had this like small core little family unit, and then the wheels kind of fall off. You know, like a lot of people have their version of this story. This is very common. We're all humans in this human experiment.
Yes.
And it was traumatic. It's traumatic much more in retrospect. At the time, I'm 10. Things are kind of falling apart, but like for the most part, I'm a happy kid. My dad had I can't speak for him, but essentially things are falling apart, and he's like, let's go on an adventure. I mean, that was his response to it. And that very much became my response, which I'm sure we'll get into later in this conversation. But, you know, we went to Mexico from Mount Shasta, and we packed up his little 2-wheel drive pickup truck and loaded it with a surfboard and a bicycle. And, you know, I think he had $400 or $500 to his name in his pocket, cash. And we set sail on this very incredible adventure, and also, I believe, a quest for healing and all sorts of things, you know. But it was like, you know, I had my normal life, school, kids, everything, and then summer started, and me and him were in Mexico, and it was a completely different life. And we you know, I remember sitting there at one moment in time, early stages of that trip, and going, it dawning on me that my sort of family life was falling apart, and had a really powerful moment where I was sitting in a little restaurant with my dad and just wondering, like, why is this happening? And feeling the pain of that. And he just said, look, I know you have a lot of questions, and I don't have a lot of answers. I don't have all the answers, but I can promise you one thing: we're going to have a lot of fun. And that's the way he responded to it. And it's a beautiful way. I mean, it's beautiful. I think there's probably other things that 9-year-old needed as well, but you know, everyone's trying to just deal when it comes to like these heavy topics. And I will say that at 9 years old, when that kind of event's happening, and then the response to it is adventure, it clearly defined my life. it defined who I was going to become, because I went, from when shit gets heavy, just go adventure, go seek things, go, and it'll be all be okay. And on some level that was true. Is there a little escapism in there? Probably. But it really did. I mean, I can tell you every single detail of that trip when I was 9 years old. This is almost 40 years ago.
Wow.
So it really set the stage for who I was going to become.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So you returned to the States. You first picked up a surfboard at 10.
Mm-hmm.
7 years later, you were a pro surfer.
Yeah.
That is just an extraordinary ascent. Something really drove you, and I'm wondering whether it was more than a love of the sport. When you think about the tenacity and the resilience and just the sheer energy that you put into becoming a world-class surfer, how do you reflect on that now?
Yeah, I've been kind of unpacking this topic a lot lately, just with my own personal growth and self-discovery. I'm in a really cool chapter of my life now where I'm looking at all that stuff, and I realized that, like, and I think trauma, through sort of these pivotal events in your life, they can spawn new parts of you. And there was at a certain point, and I'm very clear that whole thing happening with my mom and my dad, and just as an only child too, and like essentially losing your mother. I'm very clear that a lot of the things I did in my life thereafter were in response to that, and a lot of them are great. A lot of them served me well, and essentially what happened, what I've realized, is that there's been this part of me that's very much of a drill sergeant inside of me, and essentially my protector, because I'm this vulnerable little being, and something happens that threatens that being. So you have two choices. Are you going to go down the path of self-destruction and, who knows, addiction, suicide? I don't know. That's where I think all that stuff stems from. Or are you lucky enough to have a part of you rise to the occasion? And this part of me was this drill sergeant, and he's fucking hardcore, and he also served me really, really well throughout my entire life. I achieved things because that was the response to pain and hurt. And so, yeah, that was a pretty fast trajectory for a professional athlete. But there was no way it wasn't going to happen. I escaped the things I was feeling in a really positive way through surfing. Luckily, it wasn't drugs and all that stuff. It was in this sport and in this thing where I felt peace in the ocean. I felt peace from my mind, all of it. And this drill sergeant kept me on track and gave me this incredible tenacity and motivation and determination and dedication. Like I don't need discipline. I had so much self-discipline that I was going to achieve things. And of course, if you really want to break it down or psychoanalyze it, it's like if one of your parents leaves you, if you feel abandoned, then you don't feel worthy, and then you find the worthiness, and you find it through achievement.
Yeah.
Does it really truly fill the hole? Probably not. But you achieve a lot along the way.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
So this inner drill sergeant, I want to come back to him.
Yeah.
Internally, you had this support in this inner drill sergeant that gave you this sense of discipline and determination and drive, and you expressed that in, at least physically, a very healthy way, surfing. And outwardly, you've spoken before about the support of your dad, of Jack.
Yeah.
And the sacrifices he made, the grueling hours that he worked, it seems to me that he was an unwavering supporter of yours as you ascended the ranks in surfing. How do you think about that relationship
Oh,
with your dad?
yeah. I mean, my biggest cheerleader, my biggest fan, my biggest support. He would work all week. He's a carpenter, woodworker, and then drive me to competitions on the weekends. No social life. I mean, he always seemed to have a girlfriend, but he didn't have like a social life. Really, he truly dedicated his entire existence to me. And I know this now, but like the support came in every form. Like I'd come home from school and say, "Hey, Dad, there's a sale on a spring suit, wetsuit, or something. At Laguna Surf and Sport. It's $60. $60. I mean, that dating myself right now, but
It was
it'd
a
be
big sale.
something like, yeah, something like that. And he would just reach into his pocket and pull $60 out and give it to me, not knowing that we only had $80 for the week or something.
Right.
And so we ate canned soup for the rest of the week. That's the type of those are the types of decisions he was making. For much of my junior high career, we lived in a little studio. I slept on the couch. He slept on the bed in the same room. But we were a block from the beach. Who needs a babysitter when the beach is right there? Right. And he also comes from Southern California and surfed and skied and all that kind of stuff from these subcultures where there very much is this brotherhood and this kind of family structure where that if your kid's down at the beach, he's around 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds. There's generations of people that are all tied together by this thing that they love, this shared passion, which was surfing. So he would say, okay, I get off work at 5 p.m. and you get off school at 2:30. When you get home, go to the beach and go surf. He knew I'd be taken care of. He knew that the people are looking out for me, and then be home at 5, and then we'll do your homework, right. and then do it again tomorrow. And it was just 100% support for my aspirations of becoming a surfer, a professional surfer. I achieved a lot in a short amount of time because of that support and because of my drill sergeant and all of these factors. And I remember I was in my junior year of high school, so second to last year of high school, and I was getting all these opportunities. I was already even getting some cash from sponsors under the table. Right. It wasn't really legal, but it was happening. And that was the path. I was going to go down that road. There was no talk about college or anything like that. And it was great, except for the school decided to pull me in for put me on an attendance contract because I was already missing so much school. And in 10 days from then, I was going to go compete in like the World Junior Championships in Australia, actually. And I hadn't even told them about that yet. And they were trying to put me on some contract or whatever. They brought my dad in and they were telling me like, surfing's a great hobby, but what are you really going to do with your life? And my dad just looked at me after the meeting and he goes, "You're done with these people." He goes, "Isn't there a test you can take or something like that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think it's called the GED." He's like, "Cool. It's up to you, but I fully support you if you want it." And so I went and took my GED and I dropped out of high school.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah. And I just went, and just to have a parent that's like in that wheelhouse,
yeah,
that's operating from that place is really rare.
Yes, extremely rare. And as a competitor, you were described as fiercely competitive. I'm sure that applies to many on the ASP tour. I've heard it said that you were obsessively competitive. You were a force of nature. That solitude on the wave and that sense that it was all down to you on the day to make it or not make it. How do you reflect on that?
I think it's all that I know because I always was in a solo sport. I mean, I loved baseball for a hot second, and then I started surfing, and I was like,
that was the end of that.
That's the end of that. But it's a really interesting point you bring up because in solo sports, everything's on you, and you're actually not competing against anyone else ever. You're only competing against yourself. And I have a whole different appreciation for those types of sports because you get all the reward and all of the loss and all of the blame is on you as well. So it's a kick in the ass for your ego. You know, the greatest athletes of all time have lost way more than they've won. And I wasn't even the greatest of all time. So there's a lot of losing, you know? And so you have to be able to overcome that. You have to be able to get through that. And one thing I will say is that if you can, or if you can exist in that space, it surely thickens your skin and gives you, I think, for whatever you're going to do next.
Yes. Before the end of your career, before you finished as a pro surfer, how you were starting to think, or were you starting to think about that distinction between your world and the worlds that you're encountering as a pro athlete? And was that question one that you ultimately feel you may have sought to answer through your subsequent work?
I was aware of the hardships and the inequality and the disparity of a lot of places that are very severely underdeveloped that we were going to. I was aware of them. That information was registering. It was being stored somewhere. But I was not connecting those two things. I was still incredibly self-centered, incredibly self-indulgent, and exactly how you have to be a professional athlete in a solo sport. You have to be fully focused on yourself. Anybody who says otherwise is lying, in my opinion. That being said, I think some people are just more, I mean, also my dad and my mom, you know, they're conscious people. Like, I was kind of raised that way. There was a certain level of consciousness that was thrown into every conversation. So maybe that alone was allowing me to receive that information more when I was going through and moving through the world. So I do know I was storing that information, and it was going to make a difference in the next chapter. But at that time, I don't think I was asking those profound questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That came later.
Yeah.
So post surfing, you and I met in 2008, and you were at the time doing some creative directing and art directing in a fashion brand. And I think it was not long after 2009, a pivotal moment in your life. You're in Sumatra. There was the devastating earthquake. You had some water filters in your backpack, and you were compelled to help in any way you could. Can you just take us back to that point in time a little bit, and the consequences of that decision at the time to lean right in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's funny because not a lot of people know that little in-between chapter.
Right.
When I met you, you know, big ups to John Whitledge, who's the founder of Truvada, and that was the brand that I was working for. And I was in a pretty weird place at that time, to be honest. So just a full identity crisis. You know, you're going, my surfing career was on its downward slope. And for any performance-based profession like that, there is that bell curve, and it's sobering. It's hard to swallow. You know, you're just riding this wave, and it's all eyes on you, and everything's just going amazing. And then at some point, it tips the other way, and it's less and less and less, and contracts go less, and so you know, it's hard not to have that be your identity. You know, that's what I was put on this earth to do. But I'm like in my 20s, you know, and it's going down. So thanks to John, I had that opportunity to exercise some of my creativity in a different way. I did not give a fuck about fashion. I was very honest with him, with you.
We should add that John thought that was really cool too.
Yeah.
There was no smoke and mirrors here.
Yeah.
You were very open.
Yeah, and it was cool. We did some really fun stuff, and it was good. It was a good bridge for me, for sure. I did not know what I was going to do next. And the Indonesia incident, you know, I was also in kind of a failing marriage at the time. Amazing woman, just me and her, and probably mostly attributed to just what I was going through. It was just this transformation happening, right? And at the time, my dad, as what I kind of call him, the master solutionist, because he has been such a great problem solver my whole life, and not just for me, for a bunch of people. And he got passionate around the world water crisis, the global water crisis. I think through reading a New York Times article about some villages in Africa that had to walk like 6 miles each way to some contaminated water source. And he's like, why don't they just catch rain? Like that's in his head. So he saved up money. This is all while I was a pro surfer still. Saved up money and like would do a trip to Africa a year and like help villages. No real, I mean, he did eventually develop a small NGO organization around it. And, his strength was in the doing and the problem solving versus like the admin of an organization, which I totally relate with. But anyways, that was inspiring to me. It was something that I was, he put it on my radar. He put the global water crisis on my radar, and it was inspiring what he was doing, but I was still focused on myself at that time. Then fast forward into the, I'm transitioning careers, don't know what I'm going to do. Well, what would be pretty cool is to go back to a lot of the places that I've surfed that I know have a need for access to clean water and bring solutions to them. There's solutions that already exist. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, I'm not going to pretend to be, but I'm pretty good at moving through the world at this point. So why don't I do this, not as a job, still working at Truvada, still trying to figure out who the hell I am without surfing. And I got an idea. How about I go on a surf trip? Because that seems to solve everything. My buddy had a spot on a boat trip to the Mentawais, which is like our cream of the crop surf trip in the world. It's just such an amazing experience. And he said, hey, one of the guys dropped out and his deposit's already paid, so yours will be $1,000 left. I had no money. I had just enough money for our bills the next month, and I used all of our bill money without telling my wife to go on the trip. Like such a bastard, like who does that? But in my head, I was like, I really need this to clear my head and try and get centered. I need to go, and I'll get home with like 10 days left and I'll sell some shit or whatever I need to do to like pay our bills. Like I won't be a complete worthless husband. Like I will figure out a way. No one will even know. And had I not made that decision, I mean, I don't know, we'd be sitting here today, to be honest. Like it was such a huge decision because I went over there, I bought 10 water filters with my own money. I did not have an organization. I didn't have a plan for a job or anything like that. I just said, it'd be cool to just try out my idea. I'll go on the surf trip. I'll try and clear my head from all the stuff that's going on right now. And then on the way home, when everyone else leaves, I'll go to this other island that I know has a need for access to clean water. I'll implement these 10 filters with people I already know. And I'll call it Waves for Water. And I'll call it a day. And just see if not to be my job or anything, just as a fun pet project. At the end of that trip, before I was able to get to that other island, we got caught in a big earthquake, as you mentioned, and leveled the city of Padang, Sumatra, which is where we were going through. The building we were supposed to be staying in fell. I mean, it was like a Michael Bay action movie. There's death and destruction, smoke, fire, buildings down. And we're just there. We happen to be the first responders. And I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never thought about, disaster response or anything like that. I was just there. And I was also put into one of the greatest tests of my life. It's okay, here's a choice. What are you going to do with this information? You have these assets on you. There's a need for them. Well, I just clicked into common sense mode. And I decided I was going to go in there and implement those filters. And I did. And it drastically changed my life. It will anybody going through that experience, whether you have filters or have a purpose or whatever in that moment, it's going to change your life. It's going to completely change your life because you're now confronted with something so damn real. And it's not the padding that we have in the developed world that shields us from the harsh realities that also exist. And I was confronted with that right front and center. And those 10 filters helped thousands of people. I did not know what I was doing, but I essentially got a sledgehammer over the head by the universe saying, are you listening now? This is what you're doing. This is your path. And your thick skull needs an earthquake to show you that. It was clear as day. After a 24-hour period of time of being on the ground, it was clear as day to me what I had no more identity crisis. I had no more feelings of being lost. I had none of it. I knew exactly what I was doing. I came home, I asked for a divorce. I was like, this is what I'm doing. And all I want to do is get more filters back to Sumatra. I don't care about an organization, whatever, like all the formalities, I'll figure all that out. I know exactly what I need to do tomorrow. And it changed my life. And I honestly have never looked back. I mean, it's been 15 years.
Yeah, what a catalyst. I think I remember your return from that trip and the sense of mission that you had around returning as
laser focus.
And that catalyst served to, as you said, completely reframe and refine your identity going forward. And you were driven by a desire to serve others as opposed to achieve your own dreams. As you lent into that and you fully embraced this new identity, I'm interested in understanding whether the same drives were propelling you forward or whether you were starting to evolve your thinking around what this new phase of your life looked like.
Yeah, you're very intuitive for asking that question, and it was the exact same drives. And it was outwardly facing selfless, and at the truth, totally selfish still. But it is possible for something to be selfish for you and help a ton of people. So my surf career didn't necessarily help anybody except for me. You know, maybe inspire some kids or whatever, but this is just another iteration of that. And this, I'm not going to speak for anybody else in that field. I can only speak for myself, but in the humanitarian space. But it does a lot for you, you know, arguably more than anyone else you're helping. The thing that set me apart when I started Waves for Water was because I was a pro athlete. I didn't come through the normal channels, like going through the Peace Corps and whatever, the different channels to most people that are in those jobs. I came at it from a competitive, professional athlete mindset. And I wanted to win the cause. I wasn't necessarily competing against other organizations or people like that, but I wanted to beat it. I wanted to win. And I approached it with that same exact tenacity. It's still fully driven by the drill sergeant inside of me. I mean, you know this because we talked, you know, and through those times, and it was relentless. I was going from Afghanistan to Somalia, to Haiti, to North Korea, to, you know, and we're talking about like 2 weeks later, when one of those things should be like your big thing for the year. And it was just like, boom, 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 you know,
relentless.
Relentless. And that's driven by a few things we've already talked about, right? The drill sergeant and like the need for this deep-rooted need for worthiness on some level, although it's not conscious while it's happening, right? It's just this thing. Now I can look back and go, whoa, okay, I see. And then also this hyper-competitive, like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking beat it, and I'm gonna win the water crisis. And there's actually like metrics that are really interesting, right? You know, it's like when I first started, there was 1 in 3 people didn't have access to clean water around the world. And then like 10 years into it, that statistic was 1 in 10. And it's not that we did that, but that's a big, like, that's a measurable, or sorry, it was 1 in 6 or something. And then it was 1 in 10. You get what I'm saying. There was like this thing where like, oh, it's actually changing.
There's a marked improvement.
It's getting better, you know? So, that kind of stuff like tickles the competitor in me.
Yes.
and and it gamifies it in some level. And at the same time, in parallel to all this stuff, it's this really dynamic, awesome life full of adventure. And right up my alley. It's like an extreme sport. Like if surfing's an extreme sport, then disaster response and conflict zone work and all these crazy places is like beyond extreme sport. And that's the way I approached it. And it was full blown heavy metal rock star mentality.
Right.
I was partying hard. I was working my ass off. We were making huge strides against the global water crisis, fighting it. And, it was awesome. It was like such an incredible evolution.
Yes. And it reminds me actually, the way you just described it is something you said at the time, which is service is freedom. And can you unpack that a little bit? Freedom from what?
I think from the boxes that we put ourselves in, or people put us in, these stories that we tell ourselves, going out there and serving others and serving something greater than yourself takes you out of those boxes. There's new boxes you can put in yourself always. But those ones, it's funny, I think about like this group of guys I grew up with, they're friends that we're all like not related by blood, but we're like brothers, right? They're your best friends. And I remember at a certain point in time, certain guys like dropping off, in a sense, like we all had the same mentality and the same desires and the same thing. And then someone was like, it's time to hunker down. Now you hear these like terms, like time to hunker down and like get a real job or like whatever, and I just never lost the innocence, that original innocence of like the what if, and I think that might just be the only difference. And of course there's other factors like my own makeup and the drill sergeant and all these other factors, but like those are boxes that you're put in because of your upbringing, your parents, your dads. If you had not a father like mine, but a father that worked in insurance and that was like, you got to just, like be an insurance guy or an accountant or whatever, and that's success. And even though the kid isn't like that, we're the next generation and we have our own minds, but then all of a sudden those boxes start to close in and go. So I think serving something greater than yourself is one potential pathway to break free from some of those boxes.
That's the freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you've spoken really articulately about all the benefits. On the flip side, it occurs to me that a decade of constant short notice response to crisis, relentless international travel, the visibility, the global and media visibility, but also just the fact that day in, day out, you are dealing with someone's very worst day. And then you're on to someone else's next worst day and someone else's next worst day and someone else's next day. And that must have taken a toll. There were clearly positives, but help me understand what price is paid.
I genuinely took a loan out on myself. That's the way I see it. And it's going to impact the longevity of my life. And it was all done for the right reasons, but it took a massive toll on me. Like I was pulling so many levers. You don't see anybody old in that profession, for one, let's put it that way. I have an entire full head of gray hair. There's another indicator. I handled the stress great. I was in machine mode. And again, we're going to probably bring him up a million times, but the drill sergeant really, served me in a lot of ways and made me hyper efficient in that environment and against those odds. But it's a real life taxing that's happening. I got to a point where I was taking sleeping pills to go to sleep, drinking caffeine to stay awake, drinking alcohol to relax. These are the levers I'm pulling. And just chalking it up to like, yeah, it comes with the territory. Right. That's normal. And I had a time, and that's just on the physical side. That's just on how physically taxing the whole thing is. You know, jumping time zones. I'd spend 10 months out of the year on the road. Spend like maybe a week a month in, you know, New York or LA or wherever I was to just touch back down, talk with my team, you know, whatever, drink a bunch of whiskey, and then go right back out. I'd go for, and then you've got the emotional and psychological side, which is you're going from people, like you said, at their absolute worst. And I'm talking at like just a normal baseline project, a development project, no conflict zone or no disaster relief. It's still the heaviest conditions because that's where the greatest needs are, right? So you're still with people that it feels uninhabitable.
Yes.
And you're there. And then you've got this contrast where then you fly home to your totally privileged existence. And what that does for your mental state and your emotional state is really intense.
Yes.
And I remember having a time where I came back from my first trip in Afghanistan, and I was living in New York at the time. I was going to be home for like a week. I was working in Afghanistan in one of the most kinetic zones for fighting at the most intense time of the war. We were taking indirect fire at the base that we were at, you know, every few days. And it was just such an intense environment. And I flew back within 24 hours. I was in New York City, and I was walking on the street at, I think like Prince or Spring and Broadway, which is, if people know New York, is a very busy intersection with tourists and all this sorts of stuff. And I had this moment where I felt outside of myself, outside of the reality I was in. I felt outside of it. I did not feel connected to where I was, so much so that I questioned if it was real, if I was where I was, who I was, you know, if I was real. And I walked up to a stranger, a woman, and tapped her on her shoulder and said, "Hey, can you see me?" And she said, "Yeah." Like, she freaked out, and I guess that was a good indicator that, like, okay, I am here, I am real, I'm here. But that's the level it got to mentally, and that is that story is an example of a type of PTSD.
Indeed.
100%. It's textbook. So it was real, the impacts, and that was just how it played out for me. I listened to a Sebastian Junger story that he had similar on the subway. So it's all normal now. I can understand where it was all coming from. But I mean, that's just an example of like the mental toll it was having. The emotional side was going to bite me in the ass, but not till later. At that time, I was in full machine mode, and I wasn't even allowing myself to feel anything. I didn't, not consciously, of course. I didn't choose to not feel anything. I just was like, I can handle anything, and I'm the man, and whatever. And but it was all really taking a big toll, and it has taken a big toll on me.
Can you identify a moment, or was it more a series of events that culminated to a moment where you acknowledged quite consciously that doing good was not quite the same as feeling and being whole?
It was definitely a culmination, and I think what it comes down to is, and a lot of this stuff, it's hard not to speak in retrospect and with that clarity, because at the time there isn't that clarity. But there was beginnings of a thought pattern of like, at what cost? Yes, there's immense good that's happening, but at what cost? To me. And there was a sequence basically at a certain point in time where I was really unhealthy. You know, I was probably 10 years in, and I was at my worst with like, even as a lifelong athlete, even through all of that stuff, I was always very active and all this stuff. I was like less active at this time. My wife says I was skinny fat.
Does she mean that as a compliment?
No. She's like, you were just unhealthy, you know, like, and it's true. You know, I was basically in fight or flight for 10 years. My cortisol was probably just through the roof the whole forever. I didn't know anything about these things, but I was in that state for a long time, and I was pulling these levers to just feel some semblance of normalcy. And I got to a point where I definitely felt like something was wrong, but it was real interesting. I had these emotions start to bubble up, which was weird in and of itself for me. Just I could name the times I cried in since I was 10 years old, you know, or essentially in my adult life on one hand.
Really?
Yeah, it just wasn't me. I just didn't have access to that side of me. Something shut down when I was a kid, and it never reopened. The drill sergeant was busy doing other things. There was no room for that. No room for emotion, right? And I think because I probably got so depleted, and I got to this place of such severe imbalance, that maybe cracks started opening, and I started feeling some emotion, not tied to any of the dozens of traumatic events that I had been a part of. It wasn't like I was getting flashbacks and then I'd become emotional. It'd just be like out of nowhere. And immediately I'm like, well, something's wrong, because emotion equals bad. Something is wrong, emotion equals bad. I am fucked up. And that was the beginning of this like long healing journey that I've been on now for 6 or 7 years. But it was a culmination of a bunch of things, and then that's how it manifested enough to where I'm now listening to, of course, everybody around me, friends and family, knowing what I do and what I'd done, are all like, you have PTSD, you're fucked up. That's the narrative that I'm hearing from everyone. You hear something long enough, you start to believe it. And then on top of it, there's this like physical manifestation through some emotions that's not normal either. And that's the validation. Yes, I'm definitely fucked up. I definitely have PTSD. And I was working with a lot of veterans at the time through all the conflict zone work I did. And a couple of them had told me about some MDMA therapy that they were doing for PTSD. And I said, well, I got to try that. I mean, I'm fucked up. Like, I need to do that. So I actually sought out a MDMA therapist and went and had my session. And it was the beginning. It was like the gateway into such a righteous journey of self-discovery for me. I mean, it was just that I went on, that I am still on, that I will continue to be on. And there's a lot that's happened in a short amount of time.
This is super exciting. I feel like everything we've discussed so far has been a preamble to this point. I'm really interested in diving in now to help the audience understand the drill sergeant.
Yeah.
When did you first meet your drill sergeant?
Very recently, actually. So I've talked about him so much throughout this conversation. That's because I now have this intimate relationship with him, where I've been able to actually talk with him and have this understanding with this part of myself. But yeah, it's through a combination of efforts and therapies and different modalities and plant medicines and all these kind of things that came together that led me to also be working in IFS. And the beauty of the IFS structure is that it helps you put a picture to all of this. Like, that's all for us to digest stuff that is so incredibly complex. We need some understanding. We need some picture we can like put to it, right? And so that picture for me is like, okay, this part of you is X. This is your protector. This is sort of where he comes from and why. And we go so far as to like put a face and a name and an identity to him. So I remember one of my sessions, the therapist was like, well, you know, I need you to have a conversation with your protector. I need you to, you know, who is he? What is he? You know, and I'm like, I'm like, go in, and I have this moment. And all of a sudden there's this, somehow I'm on a porch, kind of in the jungle, but in this little shack. And it's like Nick Nolte. Not actually Nick Nolte, but
Resembling
but
Nick Nolte.
resembling Nick Nolte, like late in his career, not now obviously, but like late in his career, really weathered, kind of messy hair, like a Hawaiian shirt that's open to here, cigarette, raspy voice, scars, and just like kind of red face, you know. And this is my protector. This is my drill sergeant. And he looks like he was in the military, right? But he's kind of after the fact, and I get to have a conversation with him. And so as soon as I learned about him, I immediately, which was such a profound realization for me, I immediately was like, oh my God, I understand now. I understand what was behind all of the decisions and so many of my actions in my life. I understand now what was behind it. Oh, that's such great information to have. Cool. Well, guess what? I'm like so much more balanced and healed now. And I have the awareness, and I don't really need him. So thanks, but I'm like, awesome. Like, if my drill sergeant, if Nick has been driving the car since I was 10, my whole life, I'm now driving. This version of Jon is driving. And that's awesome. Put him to the side. What I didn't realize is that that's not really cool to him. Like, he's done so much for me and been such a huge pivotal part of me that's served me very well in a lot of ways. And yeah, is there shortcomings and is there things that need to be worked on over there as well? Of course. But to discard that is discarding a part of me. And if I'm going to evolve into a better version of myself, that's a whole self. So I need to understand these parts, and I need to integrate them. And I need to have these relationships with them and understanding. So I went back and had a conversation with Nick, and
Is he still in the jungle?
Yeah, still on the porch. Because my whole thing was like, bro, you can go on vacation now. Go play golf, relax. You know, it's all good. I don't need you anymore, which is also not true. It's about integration, right? It's about looking at this part of me that has served me well, but is not needed to lead the charge anymore. And that's a huge thing, breakthrough for me. That's so awesome. But yeah, maybe at times I do want to pull Nick back in, help me out for something. I like to climb mountains now. This is like a big passion of mine, high altitude mountaineering. Definitely need Nick to get up some of those things. You know what I mean? That's something I'm into. So, but I had to go repair this sort of insensitive discarding of him. And I went back in and talked, and he was okay. Like, he said, he looked at me and said, hey man, I'll always be here for you. And I totally understand what you did and why you did it. Like, it's a big thing, you know, and I'm proud of you and all these things. And yeah, it was really cool.
That's very cool. How do you reconcile that drive to seek out the edge, that fearlessness and that courage that kept you pushing and pushing and pushing, with, at least to some extent, an escape from pain?
I mean, it's all tied to that, the way I see it now. It's Nick, it's the drill sergeant, it's that relentlessness. It's just that relentless pursuit of not just perfection, but just more, better, faster, bigger, stronger. It's never enough. So you achieve something, that's great. Now it's time to get to work. Right away, that day. You know, there was, and it allowed me to really make some big strides and moves in my life and for the things I was working on. But it's directly tied to the pain. It is. And I'm only now starting to learn how to give myself credit.
Right. And to celebrate a little bit.
Yeah, or just self-love.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there a particular session or a particular modality where you opened yourself up to that notion of self-love, of grace, of forgiveness? Or was it more a series of insights that continue to compound one on each other?
I think it's probably the latter. I think it's more of a series of things. Although, like the practitioner name for MDMA therapy is like heart medicine, and it really does. It is such a good gateway into yourself and into really starting to heal. And where do you start with? You start with the heart, and you need something to be able to crack your heart open. Some of the other plant medicines and psychedelic therapies might work more on cracking your head open. But the MDMA really opens your heart, which is the baseline. Like that's where you start to feel what self-love is. And so that was a pivotal, crucial step that I think has to happen before you can even start to explore your mind or anything else. So that was a big one. And then I think the series thereafter, the sequence, I went into I did some EMDR therapy as well, which was, it's a sort of, not hypnosis, but there is an eye component, like where you follow somebody's finger. And basically that one's really good at unpacking and processing specific traumas. Like you go into the story and you go through it, and you kind of reprogram. So that helped a lot with like a lot of the dozens of first responder, like horrific, morbid shit that I've been through. But then, I did psilocybin therapy, and that was like, I wanted to unlock, I was feeling creatively stagnant at that time, and I felt like, oh, this could be a good opportunity, because now I was on this sort of trajectory going this way, and I was a full believer after the MDMA session, and I was like, it really also, it doesn't just open your heart, it opens your capacity. It opens your capacity to receive and to be more open-minded to like, oh, maybe I'll try that modality or that therapy, and not rigid about like, well, that's too woo-woo, and that's, it's really a powerful gateway. And so then it was like, oh, try psilocybin therapy. Maybe I'm creatively stagnant. And, that was incredible, because I had sort of went in with the intention, and so much of this psychedelic work in the therapeutic context is about intention and your intentionality. And so I worked on that in the beginning, and it was like, well, I really want to just remove the blockages that are blocking me from my own creativity and stuff like that. And I got out of this, it was a wild experience. It took a massively heroic dose, bigger than a regular heroic dose. It was.
Of course you did.
Of course, yeah. Of course. Damn, thanks, Nick. And and I came out of it with some really profound insights, but I was like, I didn't really get my answer.
Right.
I didn't get my answer from the the creativity standpoint. And to preface this, I want to say, like, my entire life since I was 16, I've drank alcohol. And partied and drugs and all of it.
Yeah.
Pro surfer in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's just what's happening.
Yeah.
And as some of that stuff maybe tapered by this point, I was still, from a drinking standpoint and a partying standpoint, it was very much part of my identity. It was part of my DNA. Like, that's the way it felt. So there's not even an idea of addressing that in any of these therapies, because that's like saying, well, I don't want blue eyes anymore.
It's a problem.
It's just,
it's not gonna happen.
It's not even in the question. It's not even in the conversation at all. And then I do the psilocybin therapy, and they say this about specifically certain plant medicines, especially at a massive dose, is how it can actually rewire you. And if my drinking and relationship to alcohol and partying and all that kind of stuff was a wire that was like plugged in these two, connecting these 2 points, then the psilocybin can come in and go like, yeah, well, let's just move this one and move it over here, boom, boom. And not knowing this is happening, right? I didn't have enough experience or awareness or understanding. So I come out of that experience, and it's like happy hour the next week or something like that. I'm still reeling from the experience and trying to process and integrate what I've learned so far. And And the happy hour waitress comes over and says like, "Would you like a drink?" And I'm like about to order margarita or whatever, you know. Usually for me it was always a shot and a beer. And I'm like, uh, "I'll have some club soda." And it totally caught me by surprise. I had no feelings around it. There was nothing. It just was. It was like a different person. It was that wiring was so like a switch went off. You know, the medicine had turned a switch, and I just didn't want it. And then I was like, that was weird. And I looked over at my wife, and she's like, "Geez, like
Okay.
that's interesting," you know, because we still weren't connecting this at all. And then the next week we went out, normal time, friends, happy hour, same thing. The waitress came around, and I haven't drank since, and it's been years. And it's not like I am consciously trying not to. I don't want it. I do not want it. That wire got moved to a different place, and that anything that was feeding the old one is gone. So there's zero charge around it. There's zero emotion. There's zero identity. There's nothing. There's zero appetite. So it just changed that. This 30 plus year behavior and habit and pathology, and it just switched it in one session. And I've never looked back. And then I finally made the connection. Oh, I was asking the medicine to remove the blockages, that the things that were blocking my creativity.
And it did. That's extraordinary.
It's extraordinary. And like, you know, the fog that you can be in. I have no judgment around alcohol, people, you know, and if I want one, if I want a beer at some point, I'll have it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, whatever. But I just don't want it. But the fog that comes with that definitely, in my case, was blocking me.
Yes.
And my creativity. So that was huge. You know, you have the MDMA thing, boom, like then the psilocybin and the EMDR and all this stuff. And yeah, it just keeps going.
This whole process, for the benefit of those who haven't gone through it, it might sound interesting and cool. It might sound completely terrifying. It might sound woo-woo. But one thing it is definitely not is glamorous. It's enormously confronting. It engenders a level of vulnerability that can be very difficult. And for me and for everyone I've spoken to about it, it requires real courage to persevere. And you've spoken about this being a journey of multiple years, utilizing multiple modalities, both plant-supported, traditional psychotherapy, IFS, et cetera, et cetera. Clearly, you've got the courage. You are persevering.
Yeah.
As you get closer and closer to that 10-year-old boy, and you think about the pain that Nick was doing such a heroic job in protecting, how do you think about that 10-year-old boy now, and what are you doing to serve him?
Yeah, this is a very poignant topic for me right now. It's fresh. And just like I was introduced to Nick and the drill sergeant in me, I went back and was able to identify. At first, I had no bad memories of my childhood. Zero. I had pushed it so deep. And even despite knowing the dynamic with what happened with my mom, but her and I have a great relationship. We're in our adult relationship. It's really healthy and good. And I've turned out all right. I'm successful, in these different ways, and like, I'm good. But as I started peeling the layers of the onion back, and also in conjunction with each of these other profound breakthroughs, those just opened the door a little more, a little more, a little more. And it was in one session that I had, therapy session, where it was like, hey, think about a moment, think about a memory you had when you were young, where you felt really abandoned, or we're gonna dive into the mother wound.
Yeah. Like
how do you, I want you to try and find that. And I couldn't find one. And then all of a sudden I had a memory of being in Mexico and being with my dad, and I think I mentioned it earlier, but like being in this restaurant. And this isn't like a dream. This happened. This is real. and I was 9 years old. And I think that was the moment I realized that the life that I knew was falling apart or had fallen apart. And I remember looking at my dad just going, like crying and going, why doesn't my mom love me? And it's still triggering for me. And of course he said, of course she does, you know, whatever he had to say. But the 9-year-old, like, so that if you look at all this stuff and you start to really break it down, the 9-year-old never got what he needed. And I didn't even know what he needed. I mean, I didn't know any of this even existed until recently. And then through this work, you know, the therapist was like, hey, go talk to the 9-year-old. Same way I did with my drill sergeant, same way I did with Nick. And I went in there and said, hey, little guy, like, you know, I have such this picture. It was so hard for me to picture that without getting emotional because it's such a sad moment. And I asked him, what do you need? And then the therapist asked me, what does he need? And I said, a hug. And she said, no, that's Nick. That's Nick answering. I went back and thought about it again. What does he need? To know it wasn't his fault. Nope, that's Nick too. And you see how tricky this stuff is and so nuanced and sticky. And then I closed my eyes and I went and actually had a conversation with the 9-year-old. And he said, I just need acknowledgement. I just need acknowledgement that this decision profoundly impacted my life. And I turned out great. Like, it's fine. It's not about that. But in order for this 9-year-old to be able to leave the restaurant, he needs the acknowledgement. And he's never gotten it, ever. And because he's never gotten it, he's stuck in the restaurant. And because he's stuck in the restaurant, he's fucking waving his hand and making decisions in your life, in my life, as an adult. So you got a 9-year-old making decisions sometimes. And that's not cool. I understand why now. I can see it all. So then it was like, okay, I need to go talk to my mom. I need to share all this stuff. I need to go and like, we need the 9-year-old to be able to leave and go. He can still be with me just like Nick forever, and he will, but he needs to be able to leave the restaurant. And that's where I'm at now. And that's the process that's happened very recently, and I'm still in it.
How do you think you can help others, perhaps not overtly in every way, but perhaps more subtly?
Yeah, I think it's yet to be determined fully, but I think the guiding light for me is through authenticity and just showing up and really coming from a place of authenticity. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't hit the mark for me, like that doesn't have the depth that I want to see or feel, or not even that I'm interested in. And so I am compelled to try and bring some of that to something. I don't know what medium yet. It doesn't matter. It's more about like an outlet for me to be able to share some of these experiences. I'm pretty allergic to self-help type stuff, like, which is ironic in a sense because of all the stuff we've been talking about, because self-help, I mean more like the industry versus, of course, there's great stuff out there that I live by and practice. But I'm not interested in being in that kind of category.
Like the superficial self-helpy stuff?
Yeah, just like check out my system for,
Yeah.
But more like real life stories, real life experiences that allows the viewer or participant to come to their own conclusion. Say it without saying it, say it through showing it, action. So for me, that looks like going out there and tapping back into ancient culture and tradition and seeing what wisdom can be gleaned from them that could be applicable to modern life. That's my inspiration at the moment, and sort of where I find my drive and what interests me. So I want to go to, and a lot of that comes from the fact that I've operated in a lot of these places that have this incredible indigenous culture and wisdom that I just saw on the periphery of what I was doing in that place. But same thing, like osmosis happening, and remembering going, God, these, just the simple stuff, right? Like, these people have nothing and they're so happy. Just like that very shallow epiphany, that's actually super profound at the same time.
Not so shallow.
Not shallow, but at the time it's just like, just this afterthought. And then I start thinking, okay, where I'm at in my life, the things that interest me, and where I want to go isn't fully defined, but I know what I'm interested in, and I know what feels meaningful and purposeful. And that is this idea of like looking backward to go forward and reconnecting with these incredible, incredible nuggets of wisdom that come from these incredible, incredible cultures that are so often marginalized or put to the side, or like, oh, they're uneducated, or whatever. And you're like, actually, they're the most educated. And there's proof, like thousands of years of doing these things that have worked. And we just pushed them to the side because of technology or whatever. And so I'm kind of on a quest right now. I'm on a quest for, obviously you've heard my personal quest. And so I'm on multiple quests. They're tied together. But there's the internal quest for my own development and healing and evolution. And then there's the quest of just curiosity around learning these, or relearning.
Yeah.
Reconnecting, remembering these really cool aspects of, and practices, and just ways of life.
As you think about an audience that perhaps is not as open to what you've been open to, have not lent into the self-exploration quite as much, or indeed at all as you have, how do you think about connecting with that kind of audience and bringing the best of what you've experienced in your life, the things that you've learnt, and now the things that you're out there discovering in remote cultures all over the world? How do you think about bringing that to an audience that is very, very early on, perhaps, in this journey?
I think the best way to do it is through excitement, is through aspiration, and you're right. It's a fine line of being aspirational and unattainable.
Yeah.
Feeling.
Yeah.
Aspirational and unattainable. So it's not so much that I don't want to make something that's inspiring. I don't plan on making something that's inspiring people to go do the exact same thing. But I do hope that throughout the process of watching this or consuming whatever it is that we produce, there's a trigger within, in their own way, and relating to something in them, right? Applicable to them, where all of a sudden the viewer's like Googling, they're looking at, they're just inspired to like research something or whatever, it's all of a sudden it's just like woken something up. And that's sort of the purpose for me, is just awakening the inner seeker.
Yes. That's within all of us.
Everyone has it, and everyone can apply it in a different way. I've done it my way, and I have plenty of people that have inspired me that do it in their way that are totally different than me. So it's all relative, and it's if we do it right, then it just becomes this catalyst, and that's really all you're looking for.
So Jon, I'm curious, with everything you've experienced, the evolution of your life from pro athlete and all the outward indicia of success that teenage kids dream of, to the impact you made with Waves for Water, the kind of stamp on the world that a more evolved 30 or 40-year-old might dream of, to the inner work that you're doing now and the journey of personal exploration, evolution, and, dare I say it, enlightenment. When you think about all of that, if you were to be advising a younger version of yourself, struggling to define what they want to achieve in the world, how would you encourage them to think about the word success?
That's a good question, man. I think I would encourage them to shatter it. Everything they think they know about it or they've heard about it. Because the stories we've built around that word are not important to me. Is it good to have money? Yes. That helps with freedom. But can you be truly free without money? 100%. Arguably, way, way more. So that whole term money buys freedom, yeah, on some level, right? You don't have to go to work the same way as other people, whatever, that kind of thing. But I'll tell you that like 99.9% of the people that are, under the poverty line, and everyone would say are living in complete destitute squalor, are more free than anybody here. So that's a really loaded, like the constructs that we've put around that word is super loaded. So, and it's complicated, and so for my younger self, it's like, I don't know how you're gonna do this, but put a bomb under that word and blow it the fuck up. And develop what it means for you. Not the picture or the structure that you think it's supposed to be. And this is way easier said than done. But for me at this point, success means I'm operating from and walking through life as my higher self, in my highest self, which is really hard when you have all these stories you've told about yourself your whole life, and you have these other parts of yourself that have been driving the car. So it's probably a lifelong pursuit, but that to me is the North Star of success.
Yes.
If I had to even put a word to it, because I don't think that word even applies to
No.
to what I'm talking about, but we can for the sake of this conversation. And that means that my essence, the purity of my being, who I came into this world as prior to anything happening to me, that guy's making decisions, and that guy's driving, and that is success.
I love that. If we could speak directly from that higher self, I think there's so many people who are trying to find a way to identify their higher purpose, to navigate their own quest. If you were to the extent you can in the moment with cameras and lights upon us, access that higher self, that original source, Jon, what advice would you offer?
I don't know if it's advice as much as a reminder to lean into the simplicity of things. Lean into the simple things that make you happy. I'm still in that process of asking myself that question: what makes me happy truly, without the achievement and the all the stuff that I've packed on that's actually not my highest self. And I can't really even answer that question yet. Until recently, I was like, oh, you know what makes me really happy? Like purely making my coffee in the morning.
I've seen you do that, and I can attest.
Yeah.
I can attest to the pure joy that you experience.
It's pure joy.
Yeah.
There's nothing attached to it. Another one, hanging with my dog.
Yeah.
Running through the hills with my dog. There's no drill sergeanting. There's no 10-year-old, 9-year-old pain. There's nothing. And all the other parts of me we haven't even talked about. It's just, and so if I'm connecting to what truly makes me happy, what I'm saying is like, what is the highest self leading with? And he's leading with those simple, beautiful things that aren't attached to any price tag or baggage or anything. It's just happy and joyous for the sake of it. And it feeds me. And so that's the reminder I would give, is like, you don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to know all these answers. They're huge questions. You cannot expect that of yourself. But you might know some of these small, beautiful, simple things that just make you happy, and just lean into those things.
The Zen koan.
Yeah.
Chop wood, carry water.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's just, it sounds cliche when I say it, but that's it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I love that Da Vinci quote, you know, simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication.
Yes.
It is.
On that note.
Yeah.
What a great way to end. And we could do this about another 3 hours, right?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, man.
Thank you for the honesty, the authenticity, and the vulnerability. That was amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, man.
That was fantastic.
That was really good.
I loved it. Thank you. Thank you for being so open, man. That was incredible.
Yeah. You just hit it at the perfect time, Josh.
I got you on a really vulnerable day.